good to see so many crappie fishermen at a bass fishing event, so we appreciate you guys being here this morning. It's also fun to see a lot of the faces that we've been visiting with this morning, the last couple of days at the Bobby Garland booth, so appreciate you being here. A couple of things before I introduce our speaker. One is that make sure that you do have your name in the drawing for the $100 gift card at the very end of his presentation. And then for you kids that are here, we're going to have you come up at the very end of this and have a special drawing for you too. So please stick around with us. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce today your seminar speaker, who is Terry Blankenship from Lake of the Ozarks. Terry is a really phenomenal crappie angler. He has spent a lot of time on that lake as well as other lakes in the state. And he is one of the best known, one of the most experienced dock shooting experts for crappie fishing in the country. If you ever Google dock shooting on YouTube or you follow Wired to Fish, you'll see him featured a lot on that technique as well as just crappie fishing in general. And any of you that are avid electronics anglers and use Humminbird, Terry does a lot of the testing for a Humminbird. He's got the 360, he's got the new forward-facing sonar, so he's a true expert on electronics as well. Today, he's going to talk a lot about basic crappie fishing and what you can do in the next 45 days to catch crappie here in our waters in the state, but also touch on dock shooting as well. So if you have a question during the seminar, go ahead and shoot that hand up. Let's get it asked and have him address it. We've got several minutes here of great fun and education on crappie fishing. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Terry Blankenship. Thank you.
Thank you. The topic today is, Gary said, that we're going to try to discuss what kind of fishing we got coming up, probably, let's just say, for the next 45 days, kind of help a lot of people out. And so, kind of in the process, and I got my own little knot that I like to tie. It's a real quick knot, and I've learned it 30, 40 years ago. But anyway, I call it a tournament knot. I know it's got a name, and it wasn't something I developed, but I picked it up. But you know what it is it's just a really quick knot, and you know, as fishermen, when we get out there and we're in a tournament or whatever, or just out fishing in general, we kind of get in a hurry. So with this knot, you know, it just takes me just a few seconds. A lot of times I don't even have to look at it because I can tie that knot and it's tied that quick. Okay. And so what happens, a lot of seminars that I've done, people maybe have never seen that knot, you know, and I could probably have them come up in a short time and probably just take their phones and video it. But in the process of this time of year, for crappie fishing, like Lake of the Ozarks is where I'm born and raised. I've been there for, I don't even want to tell my age, but I've been around a long time. And we have let's just call this the Midwest region. So what we're getting ready to gear up for right now is the spawn. The spawn is probably to a point right now, the weather's been kind of messed up, so our spawn a lot of times is kind of going by now, but it hasn't really happened yet. The fish moved in and out, the lake's gone up and down several times, and then we get all this weather, but their biological clock's going to start ticking, all right? So that means that they're going to start coming in no matter what here pretty soon. But like right now, you know, we'll start seeing fish moving right up tight to the bank and getting the shallows. And so whenever I start looking, and say you guys that don't have an opportunity to be out there to try to just follow the fish and figure them out, you know, by kind of staying with them, I would suggest this is probably the best time of the year for somebody that don't get to fish much to go out and fish, because this is the time when most of our crappie are going up against the banks. You know, they're going to be up tight to the banks. And now, bobber fishing's big. We got these steel bobbers that we use a lot of times. Just, you know, they're adjustable. They've got slip bobbers to fish deep if you want to fish deep or whatever. But this is a shallow time to fish. It's they're going to be. I mean, I've caught fish this time of year in a foot of water, but it has to be the water condition. So that's what I'm going to start with. Is I'm kind of looking for the zone that I would start off by trying to find. And you want to look for a pea gravelly, kind of a fine gravel spot. Yeah, that's where they want to try to work up their beds and stuff. And my best possible spot that I can normally find whenever I'm at a short, don't have a lot of time to go look, is if I can find that pea gravel where it comes into kind of like a chunk rock bank. And right where that happens is actually going to be one of the most prime spots there is. Now, when I say look for the banks, I'm saying look halfway back in a cove to 3/4 way back in a cove is a good place to start, because those banks are sloping a lot less typically. I mean, there's going to be channel swing banks in these coves too, but what I look for is probably the opposite side of the channel swing, a lot of times if I can, because those banks may be at a 20 to a 30-degree slope, all right? And by that, what happens if you're saying about how deep do they spawn? People ask me that all the time. I said, well, it's hard to dictate exactly how deep they're going to be, but whenever the water is muddy, they're going to be really shallow. But if it's like you can see 2 foot deep, typically the fish will spawn about 3 to 4 feet deep. I mean, it's a good indicator. And a white skirted jig is one of the old-fashioned best ways I know of to tell how deep that they can see. Because they don't want to spawn where they actually can be seen. They can avoid it. Not that they don't, because they can if it's real clear water. But when it's dirty, they like to be just a little bit deeper. So you can take a white skirt, drop it down in the water. When it disappears, it disappeared to 2 foot, and I'm going to fish 3 to 4 foot deep. That's my indicator of where to start. And and I think all of you that fish knows that you can go out with plan A, and a lot of times plan A is going to fail. So I don't ever go with just one plan. So plan A, plan B, plan C, and I've been way down the ladder list before I ever found the fish. But that's part of the fun for me. I love to try to figure out where they're at and what they're doing. But for the people that don't have an opportunity to go out and do what I do, this time of year, we're talking this is the best time that you can go fish, because they are going to be shallow. The males and females, they will come to the banks early because they want to get to that warmer water. And the bait fish doing the same thing. So the bait fish coming up there with a combination of warm water and bait fish both, those fish want to come to that shallow water, okay? And then we have another stage where they kind of move back out and move back in and forth. And then it comes to a point where they actually want to get their spawn started, which the males are going to come in and they're going to start working on the beds and stuff. And once they start building their beds, they're not going to want to leave that spot. They may move in and out off of it because of weather or whatever, but they don't want to leave that spot once they actually start establishing beds. So this is where, when you're out there and don't have a lot of time, you can get out there with your bobber, and if it doesn't have to be a bobber, but bobber fishing is really a good method for this time of year, for the fact that those fish are, if they're in 4 foot of water, you want to fish above them. If I've been fishing 4 foot of water and they're bedding in there, I'm probably fishing 3 foot deep, just so that my bait stays above them. See, it's a critical deal to try to stay above them. But what happens in a place like a 20, 30-degree bank, it's actually broad enough and wide enough. This is a good point right here. It's broad enough and wide enough that you won't have any, you'll have a big opportunity to have more fish in that area because it's wider. It's a bigger spawning, broader spawning area. What happens is there may be a bank over here that's got a 45 on it and it's got some spawning territory on it, but you're just going to have maybe a lot narrower width of where those fish could be. But if you got an area that's got 20, 30 foot wide, you can get into a huge school of fish in a place like that. And this is going to be the males is going to start dominating that particular zone. And whenever that happens, they're protecting it. They're really protecting it. And there's about 2 times a year that I really count on crappie hitting hard, because they're not notorious to be real smash hit type fish. But what happens is those males are protecting that bed area. So anything gets in that zone, they come up and they knock it. And they like to come up, and especially in shallow water, come up and go back down. So you can get a lot of really strong bites. And and I'm with Bobby Garland, obviously. And Bobby Garland's got some of the best baits by far, as far as I'm concerned. They've got, their selection is too much to even try to answer on all. But, like baby shad, I used to throw a Roadrunner spinner. That's what a Roadrunner is. And that was how I felt like they kind of gave me the edge. And then Bobby Garland came out with these baby shad. when they come out with these baby shad, you know, I pretty much just put my Roadrunners away because I could fish or outfish my Roadrunner with it. Not saying a Roadrunner won't be good at times, but it's just such a natural looking bait. And right now, all the baby shad swim R's, they got them out there at a really good price. So I would suggest if you want to stock up, this is going to be the time to do it. But then you can talk about different selections of bait, of sizes. They've got what they call an Itty Bit. And that bait right there, I was just talking to a gentleman earlier about how he was fishing it, and I think he was from Illinois. And he said that they started throwing that Itty Bit, and he said it was phenomenal amount of fish that they were catching with it, and big fish. And me personally, you know, whenever they come out with it, I'm looking at that bait, and I knew that that was going to be a monster bait for me because I'm a big match the hatch type guy. You know, I'm always looking to see what bait's out there. The best I can, if I can figure out what kind of bait's out there that they're feeding on and maybe the size of them, I try to match up with it, okay? And so there'll be a time later that there'll be a spawn hatch and a minnow hatch that bait will match up perfectly. But I started throwing this thing in the fall and in the spring, and I was shocked actually because there's a time again where you're getting into a school of fish. We've been chasing fish on Lake Ozark for the last 2 months out in open water. I mean, we got great electronics nowadays, and you get out in open water, and for whatever reason, they'll get out and maybe it might be over 20 foot of water, maybe it's over 8 foot of water. It's hard to say exactly where they're going to be all the time, but anyway, I was throwing the baby shad and the swim R, the slab slayers, and I thought, you know, they slowed down on me a little bit. I turned around and tied on a little Itty Bit and flipped it out there. I caught my biggest fish I'd caught so far that day with it. And so, well, that's, you know, anytime you do that, you naturally, you just got to throw another one. And so I found out that whenever it's right, if it's something out there that they're feeding on that it's matching up to, it'll dominate on that particular bait. Also, how many guys here, women, that would be possibly dock shooters? We got quite a few people that dock shoot, and dock shooting to me is the most exciting fishing and crappie fishing I've ever done. Reason being is, especially, you know, you got to practice at this. It's not something you just go do. I mean, you don't just walk up to, you know, or go out on your boat and start shooting under docks and stuff. And not only that, you know, you'll get really aggravated if you don't practice a little bit. But what it boils down to is once you get into the dock shoot thing, and this time of year, our females are staging. What happens is crappie, the males are up there working on building the nest, and the females are up here maybe on a brush pile or underneath a dock, somewhere like that, and they're just hanging around waiting for their time to go in. And the males will kind of dominate that area for a while. So I've seen the point where, you know, we got what you call maybe a residential place where there's a lot of people fish at particular banks and stuff that are familiar with it being spawning banks. And so one of the advantages once you become a dock shooter is there's a lot of fish that get in behind docks. And Lake Ozark has thousands and thousands of docks, you know, so it's also can be a pattern. You'll find out that docks will sometimes fall into patterns of, like, say they're on a secondary point, you're a main channel point or a bluff or whatever. Well, we got docks for everything, so you're going to be able to find that. But if there's during the spawn, those fish will be actually probably hanging around one of those shallow docks somewhere that's around that spawning area. And so that's a really prime time to go shoot a jig back underneath the dock. And a lot of times this time of year, when you shoot a jig back underneath the dock, whenever it's really shallow, they knock the heck out of it. Because I don't know, it's just like I said earlier, it's my favorite time and favorite thing to do for dock shooting at that time because they really hit it hard. And Bobby Garland's also got, for the people that's not dock shot before, they got, these are called pull tabs. And what you do is you just hook one of these onto your hook, and you actually hold that pull tab so that you don't take a chance of getting that hook stuck in your finger. Now, on the dock shooting thing, you know, I'm just going to do a quick little example of how I do dock shooting, you know. And believe me, there's a lot of people that's got certain rods they like to use, and I won't argue with anybody if they actually catch fish and you've got confidence in it, you know that you're going to catch more fish with it. So whatever your preference is, but now for me personally, I like a 6.5 to a 7-foot rod. I actually got a 7.4 rod now that I'm shooting with, and for 2 reasons. A 7-foot rod, I found out when I got live facing sonar that I was jigging in front of the boat a lot, and I was watching my screen so much that I didn't realize when my line got close to that trolling motor, and it ate several jigs on me before I figured it out. So that's the reason I went to a 7.4 to that way I can jig out and just naturally holding the rod and it's staying out farther from the trolling motor. But getting back to dock shooting, you know, what I try to do is I try to tell people try to bring that jig back close to this bottom eye. You know, just you kind of got to get into a consistent rhythm with it. And then once you get that back to that bottom eye, you catch it with your palm. And I have been dock shooting before. They come out with the pull tabs, or I probably would have started with it. But I catch it and I try to get it where my finger and my thumb, I've got it holding up. And whenever you pull on that like this, that jig and the hook itself kind of leans forward. So you don't really have to worry about it getting hooked in your feet. You know, you can just, let me back off here a little bit. And you get, but you can do it like shots, you know, where you're just, if you got an open slip you want to shoot into, you know, this is a perfect way to being precise with your shot, you know. And if you're shooting under dock, you know, then it's like, oops, sorry about that. You're a dock shooter, so you know, right? But anyway, what it boils down to, whenever you practice to get good at this, I suggest to do it outside in the garage. If you're lucky enough to go from the living room shooting on the kitchen table and can get away with it, do it. But otherwise, I would say that you probably need to get out and open stuff. But by doing this, you know, you got to practice, okay? First thing you got to accomplish is get this rhythm. Get everything coming back, because if you catch this jig up here or you catch it down here, when you release it, it either goes higher or lower. So that's why it's so important for it to be pretty consistent at where you catch it at, because it's a split-second release thing. I mean, I'm letting this hand hold it, let it go, and then have to let this one go just a split second later. So it's a bicycle thing. You got to develop that feel just like a bicycle. But by that, you know, once you get that, then you start maybe putting a little more pressure on it and getting a little bit more power, you know. And just what you want to do is you want to just work yourself up to it. And once you get to a point where it's not something that you have to try to make yourself aim or anything like that, where it becomes natural, you know, you're not doing anything, you know, you're in a boat and it's moving around all the time. And, you know, and while you're moving around and kind of, there's no way that you can sit in the garage and sit there and sitting in a chair and shooting at a target the whole time. That's not how it is out on the water, but that's what gets you started. That's what gets you there. And so once you get to a point where, you know you're moving around in the boat, you know, you got to go to different angles and stuff like that, you know, there's all kinds of different ways to actually shoot. But the first thing you do is you got to develop that natural ability just to shoot without thinking. It's something that you got to do and get to that point. And once you get there, buddy, it's on. Because if you got the dock that's got the fish in it, it is definitely going to be a weapon for you. I always describe it like this, you know, I've got a tank that's got a cannon on it. And all of a sudden, you just add a machine gun to it. It's just another weapon. So it's the way fishing is. It's like electronics. You know, I'm been sponsored by Humminbird for a long time. I love their stuff. Garmin's got some great stuff. Lowrance's got great stuff. But I've been a Humminbird forever, and right now they've come out with the forward-facing stuff just like the Garmin and the Lowrance has got, and they're all good, believe me. But you know what I got with the boat I'm set up with, I got one of these brand new Z21 XLs, and I've got it loaded with electronics. And so when I go out, it's just like I can't keep from smiling just knowing what I got in the equipment. And it's absolutely a plus. Now, there's a lot of people, like where I was at, they can't afford all this equipment, you know, and it only took me 30, 40 years before I could get there, because I did the Johnny Cash thing, you know, where you got the old song he's got where it said, I built this Cadillac one piece at a time. That's how I did it. I mean, I've never had money. I just whenever I bought a boat, the next time I bought a boat, I tried to add another piece of equipment to it. Now I've got probably everything you can put on one. And believe me, it's some great stuff. So, but if you don't have that, this time of year, this spawning thing, I guarantee you, a guy going right down the bank, like I was describing, looking for that pea gravelly bank, you're going to be able to go right down that bank with just throwing a jig or a bobber, and your success at catching fish could be just as good as mine right now. This is my weakest time of year, and it's actually the best time for crappie fishermen to fish, because I don't feel like I've got as good of advantage right now as what I do after the spawn, post spawn, or any time after that. I mean, I'm going to still go catch fish, but I just don't feel like I've got the edge over people. So that's why it's really good right now to go out and get, I don't know what all lakes that everybody's from, but, we're talking about this Midwest region right now, and it's a lot of it to do with water temperature. Let's just talk about that. Like right now, Lake Ozark's probably 47 to 50 on water temperature, okay? And what that is a little below what we're normally this time of year, okay? And so, but the kind of the perfect water temperature for crappie fishing for the spawn is somewhere between 50 and 65 according to the biologist, And sometimes what you see is water temperature might be 65 degrees in the afternoon after a real hot day, but that's surface water. So they're down a little bit deeper. So what happens is you kind of got to let that water kind of gradually get there, and it soaks down and it stays into that temperature and gets into that range. So right now, what is this, April 2nd, is it? Something like that? Okay. Right now, I expect when I go home this week, I'm going to start finding fish on the banks. Now, I think that they've left and they're there by the last week of March. Right now, I feel like they've been held up a little bit, and I know I can go to the banks and catch some fish, but there's going to be a flood of fish coming to the banks. Okay, it'll get busy, and so I'm just going to go kind of check out some of my spawning banks that I'm used to looking for. And every year it could be a little bit different because water fluctuation can change. Our lake's controlled a lot by because of all the docks we got on there, all the personal property. It's a rare lake that has houses everywhere like it does, so they actually have to control that a little bit more. And our fluctuation may be anywhere from 4 to 6 feet this time of year, and right now it's down to 654 something, and that normal pool is 659 basically, right around that area. So we're down a little bit, and that's normal. They always have a pull down. Now Truman, Stockton, Palmy, your lakes that are flood control lakes, they can vary a lot. And I was always amazed how much, like Truman is such a great crappie lake, and I was always amazed how they keep having good spawns there. So they've adapted to that. With our lake, we've got the most control of any lake that I know of in our region. And so we have some major good hatches. Our lake's full of crappie right now, and I see some hatches coming up. They're it's just going to keep it coming. And we all worried a little bit about our electronics getting so good that we're starting to take too many fish out, but the way I'm seeing it right now, I don't know if you can take too many of them out. I mean, I used to think, I always would let go anything of the big caliber fish and try to let them go and let them dump some eggs, and I still do, but I don't feel the same way that I used to about fishing. I don't know if our conservation has just got so good that they put so many fish and bait fish in our lakes that we see a lot of shad. So there's tons of fish in all these lakes right now. So it's just a great time to go. Whenever the spawn starts getting a little later in the stage, there's going to be banks that a lot of people know, and they're going to fish these banks a lot, and they're going to have to come deep down. And those fish they're either not going to bite or they've been caught. They might be on somebody's table by now, fried egg, but those fish get a little more educated later as we go into the spawn. And so what I'm going to suggest here is if you've got the opportunity to be around docks and stuff, all of our docks have cables hanging from the sides or something that's kind of keeping them in their place. Well, those crappie love to get right underneath those cables. And so if the fishing gets tough and you're fishing like where there's a lot of docks and stuff, and it seems, you know, we're in the mid part of the spawn and stuff, and you feel like maybe it's been abused a little bit more. Well, that's where this dock shooting thing kind of comes in handy, or just getting right in line with a dock cable, and you can just cast right down that dock cable and just bring it right down along it. And you'd be surprised how many fish that could be underneath that one cable. And then the other thing is where the dock shoot part of it is there's walkways, ramps, and everything. I can pull up to a cable, be careful. I've got shallow anchor talons on my boat, so a lot of these fish are in that kind of water. Mine are 12 footers, so I can probably hold in 10 foot of water. But I can pull up to these cables or the back side of these docks and drop my talons down and let my boat control itself, and that gives me an opportunity to get up there and shoot up underneath that dock or something. You know, or even if it's a dock that I'm shooting under, you know, the backside or the walkways or whatever. But just having those shallow water talons is great. And then on the other side of it, you know, most of our trolling motors nowadays have GPS anchor systems on them. You know, like I've got the Ultrex, and they're the ones that started it with a GPS anchor system on it. And I think all the trolling motors now have it. And so there again, you know, you don't have to fight it all the time. You can use your talons, or you can use your anchor system on your trolling motor to be able to hold the boat and let you fish. When they first come out with this, I was privileged to be one of the guys that got to protest the Ultrex trolling motor. Okay, I bass fish too. I guide for crappie, but I don't like guiding too much for bass because they're too dang hard to catch, and I don't want to waste them for tournaments. Okay, but I will bass guide a little bit, but not much. But what it boiled down to is I got to protest this Ultrex trolling motor, and I actually won a couple of tournaments just because of that. So now everybody got them. It's like the first time the side engine came out. I was in a classic in Indiana, and this guy was demoing a side imaging 997 Hummingbird, the first one that ever came out. And I didn't even know what they were. And the guy, he showed me what they did, and I told my partner then, I said, I gotta have one of them. But you know, there again, I was buying a $100 draft, maybe $200 draft at the time. It took me 4 years before I could buy one. I knew I was gonna buy one. I knew from what that guy showed me that it was that good. It took me 4 years to buy one. And when I finally got to where, actually my daughter went to work for Cabela's. Well, lucky me. But anyway, she found a unit in the bargain cave in Maine, okay? And she called me and said, Dad, this is the unit you're talking about, right? And I said, yeah. She said, it's in the bargain cave here for 800 some bucks. I said, buy it. I said, what's wrong with it? She said, nothing. They don't know what it is. I said, well, get it home here. So once she got back, I bought it. Well, I went out and I fished for, I actually just used it to locate my own brush. I built a lot of structure myself. And so I knew what was out there. So I'd go out there and I just side scan all that stuff, and I figured out what it looked like. And from that point on, you know, I knew pretty much where it was at. Plus I could mark it on mine for a waypoint. Well, the first tournament I fished, you know, all these guys seen that unit on there and they're saying, huh. So what'd you give me that? I said, this is what they cost. Oh, I wouldn't buy one of them, you know. Oh, yeah. So I come in, I win the tournament. I take $3,000 home. I paid for that unit the first time I used it, you know. That was the beginning of all of a sudden this guy coming up to me and saying, where did you get that? And how much did you get for that? Next thing you know, this next guy got it, and it goes on and on. I got 6 units on my boat right now, people. I mean, it's crazy. It's ridiculous. But I got them, and I'm not giving them up. So, but it is something that is amazing stuff. But again, I've been all the way back to almost the cane fishing pole, you know. And so if you're passionate enough about it, you'll figure out how to get there if you want to. If you want to just go out and fish, this is the time to do it. I mean, we're going from winter, our water temperature has been cold, and it's starting to warm up, and those fish are wanting to find something warm, something cozy, and so is the bait fish. So that's why I suggest if you want to get in a little bit of fishing and you don't fish much, that's the thing to do. Just don't forget to grab some of them Bobby Garlands, because as far as I'm concerned, they are the best. They just don't make them any better. And whenever you come to the Itty Bit, it's a real small bait. It's 1.25 inches long, I think. All right. and it takes almost a special hook for that little bait because big head, because it's so small that it'll tear it up. So they've got 2 or 3 different kinds of hooks they designed just to go with that bait. This is a steel bobber, you know, and you just pull that spring, and there's a little notch there. You put your line in there, and it's done. You can slide it up and down that. You can make your adjustments there. It's not, I wouldn't call it a slip bobber, but you know, you can slide this thing up and down your line to adjust it to whatever depth you need. I think I already went over the tab thing, but whenever, you probably won't be able to see it from there. You can come up here and look at these baits, but you can see that's the standard size, and you can't even hardly see the Itty Bits from there. That's how small they are, but they are a great weapon. And we were talking earlier about what the favorite colors are, and you know, I get asked that a lot. And they've got this one color is what came out. It's called Blue Ice. And I think Gary told me that this was their #1 seller for when they started and for several years. And they kept developing colors. And you know, they got some crazy names on their colors. They got Electric Check-In, they got, you know, there's so many different names up here that it just, I don't know, I think he has contests and they come up with it. Well, this particular one right here is called Monkey Milk, okay? Yeah, this is their #1 seller, probably has been at least for the last couple of years. And there is something about that color that really, really dominates at times. Electric Chicken, and this is called Mayfly. You know, we got mayflies around. Mayflies are, you know, when you have a mayfly hatch, those fish know it. I mean, they live in the water. They're feeding on something. You know? So whenever you've got something that matches up with a mayfly, and this color here is called bluegrass. I use the bluegrass a lot, and one of my favorite dock shooting baits is a slab slayer, the 3-inch. And the reason I like to use those bigger baits for dock shooting is, for whatever reason, they skip and slide better. This guy here must know a lot about dock shooting, because I've seen him shake his head and actually acknowledge a lot of what I'm saying. But whenever it comes right down to it, a 3-inch slab slayer or a minnow minder, they've got about the same body size. And they're kind of a rigid looking bait. And at first, you know, when my first thought was, no, they don't look like they would skip or slide. But they do. I mean, and I shoot baby shads. I'll shoot them all. I've actually shot the Itty Bits before. Back, I don't know, Gary probably wants to tell it or not, but when we was introducing that new Itty Bit, I shot it up underneath the dock, and the first fish I got a hold of down on Grand Lake was probably a 2-pounder, and the dang thing hooked up underneath the steel of that dock, and we all saw it when we was filming it, and the dang thing broke off, and it like to kill me, because I wanted that first shot to be a fish. Not only was it a fish, it was a big one. And then I broke it off, so I didn't get it in. But there's 3 different types of Itty Bits up here too. So, you know, I'm sure that whenever we get done here, you can all come up here and glance at it real quick. That way, if you haven't seen them and know what they are, you can look at them. Now, as far as rods and reels, all right, I'm back into the dock shooting thing a little bit. But the rods, I've got a particular brand that they don't have here that I shoot with, plus I shoot with a luge rod. This is called a nib rod. Most of my rods that I shoot with are more bass class, because the nib rod is for bass fishing. And my dad always liked an eagle claw rod, and to me they was like big old whip antenna, you know, they was pretty floppy. He loved it, and a lot of people do, but I like the stouter rods. That heavy rod there, whenever you're dock shooting, will flat wing a bait. And so, with that being said, you know, the rod is, that's a 6.7. I use a 6.7 to 7.4 is what I shoot with all of them. And I want to stay, once I get into a serious dock shooting day, I want to stay with one or the other, because it makes a difference on your height. Our docks, you know, a lot of our underneath between the foams are maybe a foot high. And so if you don't have a lot of fluctuation there in height to shoot under, you know, that's why I want to try to stay with one rod. The reels I use, Dawes. The Dawes have got some of the smoothest reels I've ever used. Fishing line, I use Vicious fishing line. It's very inexpensive line. I also use a sun line, and the sun line has like this is we call it a high-vis line. You may not see it very good from there, but it is a high-vis line. The reason you want to use a high-vis line is because crappie come up behind the bait and they push it forward. And a lot of times with this vicious line is such a soft line, when they push it forward, it slacks up, and you'll see that. You may not feel it, but you see it. But that's important. You're going to catch another 20-30% of fish that you didn't catch just because you see that strike. And crappie are notorious for coming up behind the bait and just pushing it. So with that, you can change I use 6-pound test. Some people might use 8. There may be people that say they use 4-pound test. Hey, what works for you works for you. But here's what works for me. 6-pound test line, 16 pounds head. I know about how fast that's going to fall. It's going to fall about a foot a second. All right? And I'm a counter. I know that, with my electronics, I can a lot of times tell my depth. Or if I've got a feeling how deep I want to fish. If I feel like the fish are in 10 foot of water, I think I'm going to fish about 8 or 9, okay? If the water's clear enough that they can see it, And so what happens is I'll shoot it out there or cast out whatever. If I'm not bobber fishing or something controlled depth, and I'll say 1,001, 1,002, 1,003, Then I start my retrieve, and I try to maintain that level. And what happens a lot of times whenever you find crappie, they'll be in a school, if they're not stacked up on a bank in shallow water, they can be out over deeper water, and they can be stacked. Whenever I've seen with electronics for years that I see this school of fish and they're kind of tall, and then all of a sudden you'll see a school of shad, and it's going to be a cloud. It'll be a mass. All right. Well, that tall stuff, what you're seeing a lot of times with your electronics, is crappie. All right. And when I pull up to a dock and I'm shooting underneath this dock and I'm seeing fish in 4 or 5 foot of water, and maybe 10 foot, and it's showing maybe in that different depth range, well, I start at the top. If you're in a school of fish and they're stacked up, you don't want to start at the bottom, because you're going to catch a fish at the bottom, you're going to pull it up through that school of fish, and you're probably going to spook them. So, say there's a stack out there of fish that's 5 foot to 15 foot deep. Well, I start out at 4 foot, and I try to catch those fish on top. And after they quit slowing, if they slow down on me and quit biting, then the next thing you know, I've dropped it maybe to a 6 count. And if you guys look on Wired to Fish, I just got done with them in January, and they just came out with 2 different videos that's on crappie fishing. And our crappie fishing was so good on Lake Ozark that we got done so early. He said, "Do you bass fish?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You gonna catch any?" I said, "Probably." And so we just took off down the bank, and I actually we pulled another video out just bass fishing, because I got real lucky and went down this one bank and caught a lemon bass. And the last one I caught was 4 pounds, and it was like, okay then, so then we went back to fishing for crappie, because we had all the content we needed except for the bobber fishing. The bobber fishing is still, it's like top water fishing. If you bass fish, most bass fishers say the most exciting bite is top water bite. Okay, well, it's kind of true with crappie too. Bobber fishing, you're focused on that bobber. Whenever you're top water fishing for bass, you're watching your bait. You're not waiting to feel that thing strike. You're watching that bait. Whenever you're bobber fishing for crappie, you're watching that bobber, because what you're looking at is a bobber that's holding that bait out here like that, and it's underneath it. And a lot of times whenever that fish hits, you won't feel it bite on a bobber a lot of the time. I'm not saying that you won't, but most of the time you won't. All you see is that bobber go down, and that bobber move side or side or something like that. So, that's why that's such an indicator. How we running, Gary? Couple more, okay. But anyway, I would say that if you have a preference upon as far as dock shooting, Pomme de Terre, not many docks on it. I don't know where y'all from, but it's got some. I've been over there. I got a buddy that fishes it a lot, and we've had some really good success over there. And you can just go up there and find some docks, and there's a select amount of docks. But if you ever do find them at Pomme de Terre, they're normally going to be pretty good, and you catch a lot, and they get some good fish. Say we're getting post spawn, okay? This is after the spawn's basically done, and you know that's the time of year whenever sometimes it just feels like these fish have just completely disappeared. They just seem like they're gone. And so now with electronics again, you know, it gives me the opportunity to go out and find them, but they seem to be scattered out a lot more. Your trollers can catch them. I'm not a troller, you know. There's a lot of trollers out there, but I never was one that I didn't take it up too much, but I know that it works really good. But, you know, kind of what you got to do is just kind of spot fish a little bit more that time of year. You know, you got to go out and find some brush, maybe catch a few off that, and they will get out and just roam around on you. And it is a good time to be out and just be out in open water and fishing for them. But I'm a structure fisherman. I will go and try to pick off a few off the structure. You know, with electronics, again, you know, I can pull up, and nowadays, you know, we can actually see the fish, so you can just kind of get a bait and kind of hold it up under, right almost over the top of their heads and get them to bite after a while. I got what I call a trick called the Snickers candy bar trick, okay? And like you've ate supper and you're full, okay? And you go sit in your chair, and I love Snickers candy bar, okay? There's Snickers candy bar sitting right there in my reach, and I'm sitting there watching TV, and every once in a while I look over at that Snickers candy bar, and boy, after a while I just can't stand it. I gotta eat it. All right, I'm not hungry, but I gotta eat it. And so whenever it comes down to it, I have held my jig over the top of a crappie before for a long time, and found out that I can catch most of those fish if I can see them. And nowadays, with whether they're visual or with electronics, that's kind of what I do. I'll try to get right on top of it. But again, we're in the best time of the year. You know, the month of April is crappie month. You know, some people believe that's the only time the crappie bite. It's not, but it is an absolute excellent month for crappie fishing. What do you think?
Big hand for Terry Blankenship. And